I was looking at the Land Cruiser 300 series lately and kept going back to videos, kept watching reviews, and it wasn't doing anything for me. And I was quite like, why? Was something wrong with me? And I couldn't quite understand the feeling inside. And I realized what was happening to me. I wasn't falling in love with it, and I was surprised that I wasn't, because I've always been a Land Cruiser guy. 80 series, yep, I had one. A 105 series, I had one of those. Look that up if you don't know what a 105 is. And then the 100 series, the true 100 series didn't really do much for me. The 200 series didn't do much for me until sort of later on in the years, and my mindset changed towards what I would picture myself driving. I got maturer, and hence the 200 series started becoming a little bit more attractive to me. But even so, I believe that the 80 series, the VX Limited, the Japanese high-level grades, and the 105 series is probably the holy grail of Land Cruisers. And I still think that they would be the two most collectible models of all time. And that got me thinking, what is it with modern cars, modern SUVs and trucks, that don't make them as attractive, as robust looking as their predecessors? And I figured it out, I think. So if you look at a 300 series Land Cruiser, or even a 200 series Land Cruiser, basically any modern SUV or four-wheel drive, it's not about the way that it's designed, because cars are designed quite conservatively these days. They have to appeal to the broadest range of people, the broadest market. Manufacturers hate making cars. I've realized that recently. Car manufacturers absolutely hate producing cars. That's why, back in the 90s, you would get a new model Toyota, a new model Nissan every sort of 4 years, and it was completely new. Maybe it had some switchgear from the past model. Maybe it shared like engines that were reworked and things like that. But for the most part, they weren't just reskins or midlife refreshes like we get today. Today, it's quite common to see a car model go 10 plus years, and all they'll do is they'll change the bumpers, they'll put like a vent here or there. Toyota loves putting fake vents in nowadays. They'll give it like sticker packs, like the Black Dolphin edition or something, and it'll just be laced in black decals, and they'll change the wing mirror caps to like black, and the door handles to black, and the mud flaps to black, and the grille to black, and the badges to black. And that's basically all they do. And when people question them like, hey, we want some more power. Like if you look at the Land Cruiser Prado, for example, and even the Hilux, the current Hilux, with the 2.8 litre four-cylinder turbo diesel, they're underpowered for what they are. Yes, they produce more power on paper than their predecessors, but they're underpowered. The Land Cruiser Prado is like well over 2 tons. And the little 2.8 litre turbo diesel, up to speed, up at 100 kilometers an hour with a trailer behind it, it can't cut it. It needs more legs. And that's what manufacturers do nowadays. They only make 1 or 2 platforms, and then based off that platform, they'll build like 10 different cars, and they'll drag those cars out for like 10 years. They'll only produce like 2 or 3 engines, and they'll put those 2 or 3 engines in everything, regardless of how unsuitable it is. And yeah, so it's none of that makes the older stuff look better than the newer stuff. And it's also not retro charm. Like we tend to think, well, the old cars had more character, X, Y, and Z. I don't think it's that either, because back when those cars were new, I remember the Land Cruiser 80 and things like that, people made fun of them for the amount of plastic that they had, that it was like fake tough. And you got to remember, like people really gave Japanese cars a lot of crap in the 90s. I remember that personally, because I grew up with friends' dads who were into like V8 Australian muscle cars and American cars and things like that, and even German cars, and people made fun of the Japanese stuff, saying that they had no soul, they had no character, they was badly designed, they weren't going to last, these small turbocharged engines. Ring a bell to what people are saying, recently with the reintroduction of small capacity turbocharged engines. So it wasn't that. It's this. If you look at any modern SUV, they've grown in the mid-waist a lot. They've really chunked out there. And if you look at the older stuff, they were quite slender in the middle. And if you remember getting into something like a Land Cruiser 80 series or a 60 series or a Hilux, even if you're in the States, if you got into like a Tacoma or even a Tundra from back in the day, it doesn't matter if it's a Toyota. Most manufacturers, Chevrolet, Ford, you basically sat with your legs stretched out and your bum on the floor. And that was a driving position because the cars were so narrow in the middle. And as time went on, we became more and more upright, until we're sitting basically like we're sitting on a normal chair at home with, our bum on the chair, our knees bent, and our shins going down. And that's the sort of normal modern driving position. Cars are really thickened up in the middle. And that's where that sort of retro tough truck stance has gone missing. It's not because they had live axles front and back and things like that. If you look at the hubs on a Land Cruiser 60 or a Land Cruiser 80 or a Nissan Safari, they all sit well below the body line of the car. Whereas if you look at any modern SUV or truck, the hubs sit well within the body line of the vehicle, and it just makes the whole thing look lower. It makes it look fatter and chunkier, and not in a good aggressive way, kind of like a bloated and not as competent off-road sort of stance. That's what I think defines that sort of classic tough truck, old school retro charm era. Because what I'm saying also reverberates within the collectability of these older SUVs. If you look at things like the Jeep Wagoneer, skyrocketed in value. It's a collector's item. The Land Cruiser 60s, the high spec models, especially the Japanese ones. I know that in America you got no other choice, but yeah, the 60 series, they're also becoming highly collectible. The 80 series, incredibly collectible and also incredibly in demand for practical purposes today. Here in Australia, I don't think the demand for a 80 series will ever die off, because there'll be two classes of people now. A new era of people who want to restore them or modify them just a slight bit, standard bumpers, a small lift, nice wheels, big chunky all-terrain tires, done. That's it. Maybe some tinted windows, and just drive it and use it. And then there's the other guys like I used to be, who put holes in the roof, shove wiring through it, a roof rack, and lights all over the place, and bull and bash it on the trees and drive it on the beach and do all these things because they're so useful. And you've got cars like the Nissan Safari, they're becoming collectible. But things like the Pajeros, also called the Montero, depending on where you are, or the Shogun, they're not as collectible. They're from the same era, they have the same retro sort of charm. Turbocharged diesel engines, surely not as powerful as the Land Cruisers, things like that. But yeah, they're really not that collectible. You can pick them up pretty much anywhere in the world for next to nothing. Still, they were cheap 10 years after they were new, they were cheap 20 years after they're new, and they're cheap today. So yeah, if you look at that Pajero from the 90s, what does it have that the Land Cruisers don't? Or what does the Land Cruisers have that the Pajero doesn't? It's the hub to body width ratio. The Pajeros had a stance that is more similar to modern SUVs, whereas the hubs sit well within the guards, well within the body line of the car, and so it looks lower to the ground. It doesn't look as aggressive, doesn't have that tough truck retro charm. Anyway, that's my thoughts. I honestly think that old school four-wheel drives look cooler because their wheels sit further below the body line. It gives it a more sort of agricultural look and feel to it. And if you look at even aggressive, modern, dedicated off-road toys, I call them toys, like the Ranger Raptor, the new Ranger Raptor, even that has the hubs well within its body line. They just can't make them like they used to. And I'm pretty sure it comes down to safety and handling dynamics and things like that, because even though the Ranger Raptor has been built to basically be a desert race car, it has to excel on the road. It can't just be okay, it has to excel in order to meet modern handling and safety requirements. Anyway, that's what I think. That's all I had to say. Thanks for your time. Goodbye.